I would recommend these videos only for people who are 13 plus because this may contain things like graphic violence, major character death, or cannibalism, etc. So just listen at your own risk. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading to you my third favorite fairy tale, and this is an old Brothers Grimm fairy tale called Princess Maleen. There was once a king who had only one son, and he fell in love with the daughter of another mighty king, who was named Princess Maleen. She was very beautiful, and her father wished her to marry a prince to whom he had promised her. But they both loved each other so dearly that they would not be separated, and Princess Maleen told her father that she would not marry anyone else than the son of the neighboring king. On hearing this, her father fell into a great rage, and ordered a dark tower to be built, into which not a sunbeam nor a ray of moonlight could penetrate. When it was finished, he said to his daughter, "You shall be shut up in that tower for 7 years, and then I will come and see if your obstinacy is not cured." Provisions to last for the time were stored in the tower, and then the princess and her maid were let into it, walled up, and cut off at once from heaven and earth, and there they had to remain in total darkness, unable to distinguish day from night. The prince went off into the tower, and called the princess by name, but no sound could penetrate those thick walls, and what could she do but weep and complain? Time passed on, and by the decrease in the provision she knew that the 7 years were coming to an end, and she supposed the hour of her release was at hand. But no stroke of a hammer was heard, no stone fell from the walls, and it seemed as if her father had forgotten her. Finding no change, and knowing that their provisions would not last much longer, the position of Princess Maleen and her maid became very painful, for a terrible death threatened them. "We must not give up yet," said the princess. "I think we might try to break through the walls in some way." She took up the bread knife as she spoke, and dug and scraped at the mortar between the stones for a long time, and when she was tired, the maid took her place. After working very hard, they managed to displace one stone, then a second, and a third, and in 3 days the first ray of light fell upon the darkness, and at last there was an opening large enough for them to look through. The sky was blue, and the fresh air that came into the tower had a sweet fragrance. But how sad everything appeared to the princess! Her father's castle lay in ruins. The towns and villages round it, as far as one could see, were burnt. The fields far and wide had been laid waste, and not a living soul could be seen. They continued to work till the opening in the wall was large enough for anyone to creep through. Then the maid jumped through, and the Princess Maleen quickly followed her. Yet, now that they were free, they knew not which way to wend their steps, for an enemy had evidently destroyed the whole country, driven away the king, and slain all the inhabitants. They wandered on for some time, in hopes of reaching another country, but they found neither a shelter nor a human being to offer them a bit of bread, and so great was their hunger that they were glad to eat stinging nettle stalks to quench it. After wandering about for a long time, they came at last to another land, and there they begged to be taken as servants, but wherever they knocked they were refused, and no one would pity them. At last they arrived at a large town, and went at once to the king's court, but even here they were told to go away, till the cook said she would take one of them to help her in the kitchen. So the Princess Maleen remained to become a second Cinderella. What was her surprise to find, after a time, that the king in whose castle she now worked as a servant was the father of her former lover, and that he had chosen for his son another bride who was ugly in countenance and wicked at heart. The marriage was to take place very soon, as the prince was already betrothed to the ugly maiden. But she hid her great ugliness from every eye, and shut herself up in her own room, only allowing the kitchen maid to see her. So the Princess Maleen had to wait upon the ugly bride of her own lover. The day arrived at last in which the bridegroom was to go with his bride to church, but she was so ashamed of her ugliness, and so afraid that the people in the street would point at her and make fun of her, that she sent for Maleen and said to her, "I have had a great misfortune, and sprained my foot. Therefore I cannot go out into the town today. But if you will put on the bridal dress and take my place, it will be a great honor for you, beyond what you ought to expect." But the Princess Maleen replied, I wish for no honor that does not rightly belong to me." The bride then offered her gold, but it was all in vain. She still refused to go. At last the ugly maiden got angry and said, "If you will not obey me, it shall cost you your life, for I have only to say the word, and your head will lie at my feet." The Princess Maleen, being known in the castle only as the kitchen maid, was now obliged to obey. She therefore dressed herself in the bride's clothes, and put on her jewels and ornaments. When she entered the royal salon, everyone was astonished at her great beauty, and the king said to his son, "That is the bride I have chosen for you, and whom you must lead to the church." The bridegroom, who had heard that his bride was plain, felt rather surprised, and said to himself, "She is like my Princess Maleen, and I should believe it was her if I did not know she had been shut up in the tower, and no doubt is dead." However, he took her by the hand and led her to church. As they sat in the carriage together, he noticed that she looked thoughtful and sad, and he asked her if she was unhappy. "No," she replied, "but I was thinking of the Princess Maleen." The prince did not reply, but he wondered very much that his bride should know that name. Presently he asked, "Do you know the Princess Maleen?" How should I know her?" she replied. As they approached the church, he threw around her neck a costly chain of gold and fastened it with a gold clasp. Then they entered the church and stood at the altar while the priest joined their hands and married them. During their ride back to the castle, the princess spoke not one word the whole way, and, when she arrived, she hastened to the chamber of the bride, took off the rich dress and ornaments, and kept herself in her old gray gown and kirtle. She kept nothing but the gold chain which the prince had given her. The ugly bride then arrayed herself in the elegant bridal clothes, and throwing a thick veil over her face, went to join the company at the marriage feast. As soon as the guests were departed, the bridegroom said, "Where is the chain that I gave you at the church door today?" "What chain?" she answered. "You gave me no chain." "I placed it round your neck myself," he said, "and fastened it. Therefore, if you know nothing about it, you are not my right bride." He pulled the veil from her face as he spoke, and her remarkable ugliness made him start back with surprise and fright, exclaiming, "Who are you? What do you do here?" "I am your real bride," she said, "the one whom the king, your father, chose for you. But as I feared the people might mock me today, I told the kitchen maid to dress in my clothes and be proxy for me at the church." "Where is that maiden?" he said. "I must see her. Go and fetch her here." "This shall cost her life," she thought as she went out in a great rage, and said to the servants, "That kitchen girl is an impostor. Take her out into the court and cut off her head." The servants caught hold of her and would have dragged her away, but she screamed so loud for help that the prince heard her voice. He hastened out of his chamber and ordered that the maiden should be instantly set free. When she came into the light of the lamps, he noticed on her neck the sparkle of the gold ornament he had given her. "This is the right bride," he said, "who went with me to the church," and he led her away as he spoke. When they were alone, he said to her, "On the road to church you mentioned the name of the Princess Maleen, who was once my own beloved bride. If I thought it possible, I should say she now stood before me, for you resemble her in every way." "I am the Princess Maleen," she said. "I was shut up for 7 years in a dark tower. I have suffered hunger and thirst, and sorrow and poverty, and I came to this castle to earn my bread by service. While here, I found it was your home, and that you were going to marry another, and I should have remained silent always if your bride had not sent me with you to the church. It was I whom you married today at the altar, and I am your real bride. And if you still love me, it will be sunshine indeed after all the dark days that are past." "I do still love you," he said, as he took her in his arms and kissed her. The next day the ugly bride was sent home to her father's house, and from that moment the Princess Maleen and her husband lived in great happiness for the rest of their lives. The tower in which the princess was enclosed is still standing, and the children play round it, and sometimes in whispers tell each other the story of Princess Maleen. And that was my third favorite fairy tale, and this was Princess Maleen by, it's one of the Brothers Grimm stories. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.